Everyone knows Bruno Mars, the singer, but no one knew the real Bruno, the youngster who did 1,000 gigs before he turned 10, the teenager who slept in abandoned zoos, and the man who lost everything to gambling. Bruno, who was 39 at the time, chose to tell the complete tale, not just about the money he owes or Jessica leaving, but also about the trauma he went through as a youngster. The addiction that almost ended his career, the fame that came from it, and the terrible family secret that he has kept for decades. What he said will change everything. When Bruno Mars was 4, most kids were still learning to read. He was already doing 2 concerts a night, 5 days a week, while other kids played with toys. He was the star of his family's musical show in Waikiki. Because he wore a little glitter jumpsuit, people called him Little Elvis. And moved like Elvis Presley as if he had been born to do it. He was so good that in 1990, when he was just 5 years old, he stole the show during the Aloha Bowl halftime show in front of 40,000 people. He was on the Arsenio Hall show when he was 6. He then had a brief part in the 1992 movie Honeymoon in Vegas, for which he was paid $600 for 1 day's labor. He joked later that it was his first time living in Las Vegas. He had already done about 1,000 gigs by the time he was 10. That kind of start makes something deep inside. Maybe that's why he stated it felt like recess years later when he was practicing for the Super Bowl halftime show. But life didn't stay that way for long. Bruno's parents split up when he was 12, and the family act stopped. There was no stage, no lighting, and no money all of a sudden. Bruno, his dad, and his brother slept wherever they could. Sometimes they drove a yellow '93 Cadillac, sometimes they slept on rooftops in Waikiki, and once they slept in an empty bird zoo where peacocks cried all night. They didn't have a real bathroom, so they would sneak into hotel pools to take a shower. A lot of the time, dinner was basically Spam musubi from 7-Eleven. They didn't have power for 5 months. They couldn't afford amps, so he practiced guitar by moonlight. Kids at school made fun of him for wearing clothes from second-hand stores. But Bruno kept going. He made $75 a night pretending to be Michael Jackson so he could pay for demo tapes and bus tickets. He got strong from that fight. In 2003, music labels heard his tape and claimed he should be the next Ricky Martin. They wanted him to sing in Spanish. He didn't want to write in Spanish, even though he didn't. He didn't want to be what labels thought of as a Latin artist. Bruno was the name he chose because it came from his boyhood. It was after a famous wrestler named Bruno Sammartino, and he added Mars. Why? Because a girl once told him he was too sure of himself. You must be from another planet. He was 18 when he went to Los Angeles in June 2003. He got off the plane with just $600, 3 demo CDs, and the name Bruno Mars on his luggage tag. He lived in 4 different locales during his first year, including a $40 a night motel on Sunset and a small studio in Koreatown that he shared with 6 other males. He lied his way into a DJ gig on Van Nuys Boulevard to stay alive, even though he had never used DJ equipment before. He got fired after 2 nights, but the $75 he made kept his phone from being turned off. During that summer, there were weeks when the only thing he ate was 99-cent tacos from Jack in the Box. Motown made him an offer in February 2004. Was only 3 pages long. Bruno quipped that he'd seen breakfast menus that were thicker than that. The label didn't know how to handle him. They were looking for a Latin pop star. They let him go 9 months later without publishing a single song. It was very embarrassing. He had already notified his family back home that he had signed, but it turned out that failure was a good thing. Philip Lawrence was another performer that left Motown at the same time. They became pals. They promised each other that they would make music that record companies would have to pay attention to. Bruno and Philip were broke but determined by 2006. They wrote music in the back of Philip's old 1999 Toyota Corolla, which was parked outside a modest studio in Hollywood. The studio was run by Ari Levine. He had stuff. Philip and Bruno had ideas. They would pay him with burritos from 7-Eleven. When they heard a chord or beat they liked, they would yell, "That's a smeeze." They called themselves the Smeezingtons. They spent 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, looking at popular songs and figuring out how to write their own. They looked at more than 1,000 tracks before putting one out. Then Hemi, Bruno's sister, came in. She was working in fashion in West Hollywood when she gave one of his demo CDs to a man named Mike Lynn. Mike was Dr. Dre's employee. He almost threw the CD away at first because the voice sounded strange, like a chipmunk. But at 43 seconds, Bruno hit a high note that made Mike pause and go back. He sent Bruno a plane ticket to meet at Record One Studios. They didn't make a deal, but the fact that someone significant had noticed really helped Bruno. In Los Angeles, meeting the perfect person may alter everything. They sold a song they wrote for themselves called Lost to Menudo for $20,000 to stay alive. It was just enough to keep them from being booted out. But they got their big break when they wrote the chorus for Flo Rida's Right Round. The song went to number 1 and sold 636,000 downloads in its first week. At the time, that was a digital record. Then they wrote Nothing on You by B.O.B., which was also a smash. Bruno's song Just the Way You Are was out in 2010, although by then, tracks he had helped write had already sold more than 15 million downloads for other people. It didn't happen overnight that Bruno Mars became famous. His first solo release was an EP called It's Better If You Don't Understand, which was only available for a short time. It came out on May 11, 2010, and not many people paid notice. There are only 4 tracks and it lasts only 13 minutes. And by the end of 2011, it had only sold 27,000 copies in the US. It appeared little, maybe even forgettable. But there were songs on that tiny EP that would become the foundation of something much bigger. 5 months later, on October 4, 2010, he put out Doo-Waps and Hooligans. That one hit like a bomb. The record went 7x platinum in the US and cost $70,000 to make without any borrowed samples. And by 2020, it had sold more than 15 million copies around the world. It lasted on the official albums chart in the UK for 400 weeks straight. That's almost 8 years, which is longer than Abbey Road or even Thriller. After then, the singles came. Just the Way You Are, his first album, came out on August 7, 2010, and it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 just 8 weeks later. It lasted on the chart for 48 weeks and sold 13 million copies. It sold 6.7 million downloads in the US alone, making it one of the top 25 digital tracks of all time. Grenade followed next. During its best week, it got 559,000 downloads. At the time, that was the 8th largest weekly total in music history. Not only did it reach number 1 in the US, it also topped charts in 15 other nations. And it didn't end there. Grenade reached number 1 on Billboard 3 times between January and March 2011. This has only happened to 5 previous songs. Bruno had 2 songs that had sold more than 5 million copies in the US by March 2011. Lady Gaga was the only other artist to accomplish that before him. The music business took note. He got 7 nominations for the Grammys in his first year, including Album and Record of the Year. Lauryn Hill was the last male solo artist to win it. He didn't win the top awards, but he did win Best Male Pop Voice for Just the Way You Are. He was only 25 years old and the youngest guy to win that prize since Stevie Wonder in 1974. Billboard crowned him their top Hot 100 artist not long after. Even Adele's late-year surge couldn't stop the IFPI from calling him the best-selling musician in the world in 2011. But he wasn't finished. Locked Out of Heaven came out in October 2012. It began off slowly, coming in at number 34 on the charts. Then it went up. It reached number 1 in 11 weeks and stayed there for 6 weeks, from December 22, 2012, to January 26, 2013. That made Bruno the first male solo artist to have 4 Hot 100 number 1s in his first 2 years since Bobby Vinton in 1964. Michael Jackson didn't even do that. Sales stayed steady as well. In just 10 weeks, the music sold 1 million copies in the US and went 10x platinum. Later, Spotify streams went above 1.8 billion. People who didn't like it didn't see it coming. Rolling Stone said it was the Police rebirth that no one asked for but everyone needed. That reggae rock beat broke up the boring EDM that had taken over the charts. Bruno changed the whole sound of pop radio in less than 4 minutes. At start, the strange jukebox wasn't supposed to be crazy. The label wanted a dance CD that was tight and catchy. But Bruno and his colleagues quietly made the vision bigger. They went over budget and tried out 9 different styles, from the disco sheen of Treasure to the bold, sexy rock of Gorilla and even reggae with Show Me. The label was in a panic. One memo said that radio wouldn't play an album this messy. Bruno didn't give up. He even gave up 4% of his future profits to buy live horns and old gear. The risk paid off. The album sold 6 million copies around the world in a year. People who didn't like it were shocked. Spin magazine stated it was like looking through a jukebox at 3 a.m. Crazy, but attractive. Dua Lipa and Harry Styles, among others, would later copy Bruno's style of mixing genres. More fireworks went off at the 2014 Grammys. Unorthodox Jukebox won the Best Pop Vocal Album award in 2 more. Engineers said that each song used more than 120 separate audio tracks, which was more than any other nominee that year, even more than Daft Punk's Random Access Memories. That same night, while he was doing his Gorilla show, someone complained to the FCC over a 0.6-second clip of Bruno hitting his chest. It was supposed to look like a gorilla. He didn't get a fine, but he did get a slot in the 2015 Guinness World Records for the shortest televised performance that led to an obscenity review. Sales went up after the Grammys. The Billboard 200 saw a 171% jump in sales of Unorthodox Jukebox. That was one of the biggest lifts during Grammy week since the 1990s when Alanis Morissette won. Then Uptown Funk came along. It all began on May 1, 2014, in a makeshift studio with a jam session. Mark Ronson still has a start voice memo in his inbox that has the first version on it. It took 11 writers, got caught up in 5 lawsuits, and finally came out on November 10, 2014. It went straight to number 1 and stayed there for 14 weeks, from January 17 to April 18, 2015. Old Town Road broke the record for the longest number 1 streak of the decade. At its height, the song sold 300,000 downloads a week and got 15 million listens a day around the world. It sold over 1 million copies in 10 weeks in the UK, making it the fastest-selling jazz-influenced song since I Feel Good in 1965. People were crazy about it. The month it became their boarding song, Delta Airlines even said that first-class drink orders went up by 37%. Someone at the airline called it Uptown Drunk. The BBC even adopted the song's beat to teach CPR on the air in 2015. But he almost didn't make his next big move. Bruno sent the label 24K Magic in 2016, but they weren't impressed. It included only 9 songs and lasted 33 minutes, which is less than some EPs. But Bruno was strong. He wanted it to sound like a party mixtape from the 1990s that didn't have any skips. It won a lot at the Grammys on January 28, 2018. The album, record, and song of the year went to 24K Magic, becoming the second R&B album of the century to do that. Earned 6 prizes in one night. The findings came right away. The song, That's What I Like, got 130% more streams, and it ended up going 7x platinum. Even though it never made it to number 1 on the Billboard 200, the album had sold over 5 million copies worldwide by April 2018. The tour that came next was equally as crazy. The 24K Magic World Tour began in Antwerp on March 28, 2017, and completed in Honolulu on December 30, 2018. It had 215 shows on 6 continents. He sold 48,583 tickets in Auckland, New Zealand, which is 4,100 more than Beyoncé sold at her 2016 stop. It sold 3.5 million tickets and made $367.7 million at the end of the tour. That made it one of the top 10 tours that made the most money. It made more money than U2's first Joshua Tree tour and Lady Gaga's Monster Ball. Every song on 24K Magic was made with a lot of care and attention to detail. The talkbox start to the title track was like Computer Love from 1987. The silky synths of Versace on the Floor were similar to Babyface's hits from 1994. To get that early 90s feel, they used a 25-year-old console to create the remix of Finesse with Cardi B. The 9 tracks weren't just picked at random. Bruno remarked that Bobby Brown's Don't Be Cruel was his favorite cassette. It contained 9 tracks on each side. People who didn't like it loved it. One person called the CD pop's most valuable history lesson, and another said it brought funk back into the mainstream when EDM drops were all the rage. And nevertheless, he still has more shocks. Bruno recorded the hook for Gucci Mane's Wake Up in the Sky in less than 30 minutes in September 2018. The song came out on September 14. It reached number 11 at its highest point, but it stayed there. It has gone 6x platinum and gotten 1.4 billion Spotify streams by July 2025. This was greater than many number 1 singles that year. It was late at night in Las Vegas. There were a lot of people in the Dolby Live Theater. Bruno Mars went into the spotlight at 11:47 p.m. wearing a gold tuxedo. The room got quiet. Then he said, "Silk Sonic is real." The music started a few seconds later. The room was full with a smooth, old-fashioned ballad. The name of the song was Leave the Door Open. It fell at exactly 12:01 a.m. for everyone to hear. People didn't merely like it. They really liked it. It quickly reached number 4 on Billboard, and in just 4 weeks it reached number 1. It stayed there for 2 months. By the middle of 2022, Spotify had played the song more than 2.3 billion times. Silk Sonic was real, though. They couldn't be stopped. A year later, they went up on stage at the Grammys. They were both wearing white tuxedos. There were 18 string players behind them. Bootsy Collins sat like a king on a velvet throne. The crowd stood up when the song was over. That night, Leave the Door Open won 3 awards: Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best R&B Performance. Their album, An Evening with Silk Sonic, came out in November. It was recorded in a single room with no fancy software or digital equipment. It sounded like the best of 1973. It sold more than 104,000 vinyl copies in just the first week. That was the biggest first week of sales for an R&B performer on vinyl in more than 30 years. Everything was done with care. Bruno recorded 16 distinct versions of the snare drum for one song. The last drum solo by Anderson .Dupac on 777 took place at 3:07 a.m. After hours of jamming with tequila. One take only. That was all it required. The Silk Sonics tour made around $145 million from just 37 events by the end of 2022. That comes up to approximately $4 million a night. Some fans spent as much as $6,500 on one ticket. Not bad for a band trying to sound like the past in the digital age. Then there was a surprise. Bruno delivered a message on August 16, 2024. 8 p.m. PST. Take Kleenex with you. No one knew what would happen. A few minutes later, Lady Gaga released Die with a Smile. It was all over the place. It had 27.4 million plays in just one day, breaking streaming records. The music video was like a movie. It was better than Adele's Easy on Me. It was filmed using 16mm film from the past. All of it was black and white. There were only 2 speakers, 1 chandelier, and flashes of Morse code that admirers eventually deciphered into One Last Dance. The song was at the top of the charts for 18 weeks in a row and achieved multi-platinum in 32 countries. But it wasn't only a hit, it made a lot of money. It made about $1 million a day in publishing during its busiest week. It was worth more than $11 for every second of that song. Bruno and Gaga sang it at the 2025 Grammys with a gospel choir behind them. People called Bruno a human saxophone as he hit a sustained, powerful note that lasted more than 11 seconds. That moment was the most talked about thing on Twitter, but maybe the craziest part? The last voice was done in one go. It was 4:12 in the morning. Bruno had just broken a tequila bottle against the wall of the studio. At 3:18, you can hear the glass cracking in the music. He kept it in. He said it made the music sound real. Then there was APT, a song with Rose from Blackpink. She teased it on TikTok with a 9-second guitar riff. It had been watched by 42 million people in 12 hours. When the whole song came out, it debuted at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. This was the biggest debut for a K-pop female duet ever. In just 19 hours, the film, which was packed of neon lights and flashing hues, got 100 million views on YouTube. That broke records. 9 months later, Rose was singing at SoFi Stadium when the lights went out. Then Bruno came. The stadium went off. As the two sang APT, sound meters showed that it was louder than a jet engine. 1.2 tons of confetti fell from the sky. That night, Spotify said that the song had 300 more streams than usual and more than 80% of its fans. It was back near the top of the charts over a year after it first came out. People were curious about what APT meant. Bruno finally explained everything. It meant dance after the party. He stated it was based on a night in Buenos Aires in 2019 when he and Rose danced till dawn. Bruno's phone has a video of it, but it's locked. He quipped that only Rihanna knew how to open it. The song had been listened over 3 billion times by August 2025. The duet also brought in $48 million in merchandise sales for Blackpink's Globe tour. Bruno's reach into different types of music has continued becoming bigger. But there was something more personal going on behind all the lights and records. Bruno met Jessica Cabin at a hotel restaurant in New York in the spring of 2011, well before the Grammys and tours. She had just come from an audition for a modeling job. He had just ended a performance. They looked at each other. He stayed still for 40 minutes. Then he eventually walked over. They talked until 2 a.m., long after the lights were off and the chairs were put away. She left everything behind and moved across the country to be with him in less than a year. At first, she slept on an air mattress as he traveled the world. But over time, they made a life. They lived in Studio City and had a dog named Geronimo around 2014. Bruno didn't say much about her. He named her My Rock in an interview and then moved on. He didn't say much about the sad tune When I Was Your Man. He claimed it felt like bleeding on tape. People thought he penned it while he and Jessica were having a hard time. She didn't go to events very often. For 13 years, there were only 3 red carpets, then nothing. And in late 2024, viewers saw something weird. Her posts about her anniversary were gone. A few days later, Bruno flew to Tokyo by himself. He had the gold necklace she had given him on, but it was twisted around to cover up her initials. Then, in January 2025, someone said something about Jessica's beach picture. A fan wanted to know if she and Bruno had broken up. She said that she would always be happy for all of his future successes. Just 15 words of cheering from afar. But that was enough to set the internet on fire. People began to dig. She had spent Christmas with her parents in San Juan. He played in Las Vegas on New Year's Eve. This was the first December they had spent apart in over 10 years. Sources said they were leading different lifestyles. Some people said he tried to make things better, but instead he added more shows in Vegas. But here's the weird thing. They never said they were breaking up. She still looks at his Instagram posts. He still likes her posts about her clothing brand. They still own the house together. People say that when she's in town, she stays in the guest room. Some others even said they saw her backstage at one of his gigs in May, but there are no pictures. Come out. Everything began on March 15, 2024. News Nation ran a story that didn't mention any sources, but that didn't matter. The claim was crazy enough to spread like wildfire. They alleged that Bruno Mars owed MGM Resorts almost $50 million since he had a lot of gaming debt. He was apparently working off the debt through his gigs at Park MGM, which he was doing to pay it off. The internet blew up in a matter of hours. Without a doubt, gossip blogs replicated the number. There were a lot of responses on Reddit threads saying that MGM effectively controlled him now. It was also on talk shows. Shannon Sharpe even told his audience that he heard Bruno lost $17 million in one night at a blackjack table. The picture was too flawless, so it didn't matter if it was true or not. A world-famous pop musician who sings about gold and money but is privately stuck with a lot of casino debt. It was made to go viral. The hashtag BrunoBroke was all over the place in just 2 days. And the phrase Bruno Mars, 50 millar, or death suddenly appeared in more than 4 million Google results. It all started with one anonymous claim. That same day, MGM Resorts acted quickly. Not with vague PR language, but with a clear and direct message. They informed Forbes and Billboard that Bruno didn't owe them anything. They said, no debt. They even said that they respected each other. And they made sure to tell everyone that Bruno was one of the top performers in the world. It wasn't simply about keeping his reputation safe. MGM had bigger motivations. If people actually thought their primary star was in a lot of debt, it may make investors anxious. It could even raise legal issues. People were already saying that MGM made up the narrative, only to get more people to buy tickets. But their emphatic formal denial was enough to put an end to that idea. In just 3 days, big news agencies like Variety published their remark word for word, yet MGM's stock price didn't change. It looked like Wall Street trusted them. But Bruno didn't make a dull statement. He made a joke out of the whole situation. He looked out at the crowd during his act at Park MGM on April 12 and remarked, "Ever since they said, I'm on the hook for 50 mil, my phone has been dry." The audience screamed, "Where are my friends when I'm up?" In only one day, that one moment was clipped, shared, and watched more than 6.8 million times on TikTok. Spotify said he had just reached 150 million monthly listeners a few months later, on January 28, 2025. Bruno shared it again and added the words "keep streaming. I'll be out of debt in no time." Then, 2 weeks later, he shocked everyone by showing up on stage at SoFi Stadium alongside Rose from Blackpink. Almost out of debt, his first line. That one went right to Instagram and got 32 million views in only 3 days. The story lost its sting every time he made a joke about it. People shared what he said every time he uttered it. It was free advertising for his songs and shows. There was a reason, though, why so many people believed it. The amount, $50 million, sounded huge but not out of reach. People who bet a lot of money in Vegas regularly put $50,000 on a single hand of blackjack. If someone like Bruno lost as much money 1,000 times over a few years, they would have lost $50 million. Experts on gambling harm said this and that the math made logical. Bruno had also said in the past that he started gambling before he was even old enough and lost everything he had in a poker game. That made the rumor seem much more believable. He makes a lot of money, too. He reportedly makes $1.5 million per show, which adds up to over $90 million a year. Fans might easily picture him living like a modern-day Frank Sinatra, gaining and losing a lot of money under the same neon roof.